All right, everyone. This is Sonia Liebendorfer here, and today we're going to be talking about amyloidosis. Now, I know that that is a topic that you don't see covered very much, but it's one that's kind of become a hot topic in the nursing conferences, primarily because they are running across some new medications to treat it with. But amyloidosis is one of those things that you don't really hear a lot about, but it can be hereditary and it can really wreak havoc on the body. And there are several different types of it. So, over the next several weeks, I really want to get into the different types and the different uh, causes of it, and also get into the treatments and diagnosis and how they can actually do testing to be able to diagnose these type of illnesses, because it seems if we can get to the root of the problem that we can turn things around for people, and that's important. All right, y'all, let's go ahead and get started. In this particular presentation, we're going to go over the types of amyloidosis, and we're also going to go over the causes of each type. Okay? So, what made me pick this particular topic to go into over the next several weeks? Well, there's several reasons. First of all, I think amyloidosis is something that's not diagnosed very often, that it's underdiagnosed, and that a lot of health problems can be prevented if you get an appropriate diagnosis. However, because it's something that's not really heard about very much, the people that make all of these so-called cures, which we know that big pharma is only out to make customers, not cures, have us duped into believing that they are somehow able to create a cure for this when we know that they're actually just creating customers. So if we dig into a topic and we find out what actually causes it, and we can be informed. See, knowledge is power. We can let them know that we know they don't know what they're talking about in terms of a cure, because we have found out ourselves what causes it and hold them accountable for the crap that they try to sell us. So let's get started in learning about some of this stuff so we can hold Big Pharma responsible for some of the stuff that they try to sell us as cures, which actually don't do anything but put a band-aid on the problem. So let's get started with what actually is amyloidosis. All right. Amyloidosis. Well, it's caused by amyloid, which is an abnormal protein. So, amyloidosis is an abnormal protein buildup that can either be in the tissues of the body or the organs of the body that will affect how they're shaped and affect how well they work. Now, a serious health problem is caused by this that can lead to life threatening or organ failure in multiple types, but not all the types. Some of them are restricted to one particular organ only. We're going to go into all of the different types of this over the weeks to come, so you'll have a better understanding as to the causes. But this all seems to relate back to what we've talked about in many cases when it comes to illness, and that is for whatever reason, and we need to determine the whys of this, the body develops a housekeeping problem. Now, we've looked in the past at it and we've talked about it in passing that the macrophages of the cells are the ones that go about eating all of the extracellular debris and stuff. And the main things that are the causes of disease, such as Alzheimer's, such as Parkinson's, the diseases that we have talked about are from the cellular debris building up instead of being cleaned up. So we need to find out what causes these macrophages that go around, that are designed to go around cleaning up the garbage. What makes them quit working properly? Because the why is the ticket here as to how we can stop them from going awry. So let's talk about some of the different types of amyloidosis that are out there. The first type that I want to go over is going to be called AL amyloidosis, and it's called the primary kind. The second kind that we're going to go over is AA amyloidosis, and it's called the secondary kind. Then we're going to briefly talk about DRA amyloidosis, which is dialysis related amyloidosis, but we're not going to get in it too much because of the changes that they've made in dialysis through the years. This form of amyloidosis is not as common because of change in technique through the years as it used to be. We're going to be doing a big bulk of our part on this topic has to do with age-related systemic amyloidosis. Formerly it was called senile, but now they're calling it familial or hereditary because they're realizing that this particular strain runs in families. Then, it's kind of like a subset to that, there's also something called the wild type. And it's similar to the familial, but it is the least understood of all of the amyloidosis diagnostic tests and stuff. So, of all of those, the wild type and the familial type are the ones that Big Pharma has been focusing on to try to get people to consider medicines for these. And we're going to go into all of that because I really want to get an understanding of what causes these, because they're not well known and they need to be. Because how are you going to be able to correct a problem unless it is made known to you and can be identified? The last type of amyloidosis is the one that is organ specific. It either attacks your skin, attacks your bladder, or attacks your brain. And when it attacks the brain, it's obviously called Alzheimer's because that's the beta amyloid that we talked about. All right, I'm going to briefly go into all of these different types here, but we are going to spend a topic a week going into the nitty gritty and all of the details on each one of these. So if this is something that you're interested in, if this is something that you want to learn more about, but you have not subscribed yet, please make sure you hit that subscribe button so you know whenever I post new material on this, so you'll be the first ones to know about it. Because this is going to take a lot of time, a lot of research, but this is something that I really want to get the information out there to you because this is something that they're really focusing on now as far as Big Pharma, what their pushes are as far as medications. So, like I said, knowledge is power, so the more that you know, the more you can be on the up and up as to how you can look at their medications, because a lot of times I'm finding that they really just put a band-aid on a problem, but they don't really fix the problem, which is why you'll always hear me saying they're out to create customers and not cures. The primary type of amyloidosis is AL, and it's caused by an immunoglobulin light chain amyloid. This immunoglobulin light chain amyloid is a protein that will build up and affect the way the heart functions, the kidneys function, the liver functions, and nerves function. The second type is the AA type, and it is triggered by some sort of inflammatory disease, such as rheumatoid arthritis, or it can be Crohn's, anything that's an inflammatory type illness. And it usually affects the kidneys, the liver, and the spleen is where it will put extra deposits of its protein. All right, the hereditary amyloidosis is otherwise known as familial, or in the old days it's called senile. And it is an inherited disorder that affects the nerves, affects the heart, and affects the kidneys. And it happens whenever a protein called transthyretin is made by the liver and it's abnormal instead of being a normal protein that can be used. Now, the question about all this is what's the triggering mechanism that causes this to happen? Because if we can isolate that, we can probably isolate the problem. And most of the time, it's something that is either um, a emotional or social trigger or an environmental trigger. But for whatever reason, it causes the body to go chaotic in terms of its operation. So we're going to look next at the wild type because that's the other type that they're concentrating on now because they're so similar. All right, now the wild type is the one that they know the least about, and it is when the TTR protein is normal when it's made by the liver. But for whatever reason, it produces amyloid for an unknown cause. Now, they call that type the senile type, where it usually targets men that are over 70, targets the heart as far as the organ that it attacks. But they have also found that it causes carpal tunnel syndrome. Usually, earlier in life, that's what ends up causing them to know that they've got issues. Is it initially will cause problems with carpal tunnel, and then later on in life, they start developing problems with their heart. Now, why this would get missed a lot is, a lot of men work in construction type industries and stuff that have repetitive motion. And it's because they build things, they're known for building things and making things. So we would think of carpal tunnel as being common to them just because of the type of the work that they normally do. So that's why I think for many years this diagnosis got missed because of the the type of work that they do, building things, putting things together, taking things apart. They work so much with their hands. I think that the carpal tunnel syndrome, part of it being an early indicator that there's an issue, gets missed. Now, of all of the different types of amyloidosis, they're saying that this last type, the localized type, is the better kind to have than the ones that affect multiple organ systems. Now, I don't know how you could call Alzheimer's a better type of this disease than any other kind, but to me, beta amyloid would be just as bad because it takes so very long to progress and it just makes the person increasingly debilitated. And to me, that is just an absolute curse to have to go through that for so long. But they're saying localized is a better prognosis than affecting multiple organ systems. But it just seems that the other types would take you more quickly and there would be less suffering. The correct diagnosis of these is important because otherwise you can be forced to go through treatments by a physician that are not needed, especially if it is a locally focused one that attacks the bladder or attacks the skin or attacks the throat or the lungs. But if you've got one that attacks the brain, then eventually your whole system is going to shut down because of it, that's what the brain starts to do, is it just starts to turn off the different aspects of it that are able to function. And to me, that is the most debilitating and crippling thing about the single organ is whenever it attacks the brain. As I mentioned before, the dialysis type is not anywhere near as common today as it was in years past due to the more modern techniques that they're using in dialysis treatments today. But this particular amyloidosis is caused by the buildup of proteins that are too large to be removed by the blood and get filtered out of the body. So, because they're too large to be removed and filtered out in the dialysis, they get deposited in the body tissues and build up that way. All right, y'all. This brief introduction really shows you what we're going to be going into in detail over the next 6 weeks or so. And if you're interested in learning more about the different types and the diagnosis and treatment of those and how to get screened and all of that to make sure, especially if you have a family history of this, make sure that you like and subscribe and hit the notification bell if there is one. I post on multiple sites, so there's not always notification bells available, but you make sure that you like and subscribe, hit a notification bell if it's there. I want to thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. If you have already, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad that you are anxious to learn about different topics because really the only way that we can arm ourselves against the foolishness that Big Pharma tries to sell us is by learning ourselves what causes are and what treatments are to know if they're just trying to sell us a band-aid to an issue or if it's something that is really going to fix the problem. Because most of the time, when you dig deep enough, knowledge is power, and you will find that what they're trying to sell is not actually going to fix the issue. So, with that in mind, please like, subscribe, and I will be trying to get the first part of this out to you by Friday. Y'all have a good rest of the week. Take care. God bless.